I received flowers every year on my birthday. From someone I buried 15 years ago. I received flowers again today. White lilies. Fresh. Fragile. My favorite. There was no knock on the door, no delivery van outside. Just the box sitting neatly on my porch, like it had been waiting for me to wake up. The same cream paper, the same gold ribbon, the same handwriting on the tag. Happy birthday, my love. Michael. I stood there for a long time, staring at those letters. I used to love seeing his name written like that. The way he made the M curl just slightly. The way he pressed too hard on the L. He always said handwriting showed how much you meant what you wrote. 15 years ago, I buried the man who wrote that name. I buried him. I remember the sound of the dirt hitting the coffin. It was hollow and heavy at the same time. Everyone around me was crying, but my eyes were dry. I thought grief would come later. It never really did. Something colder did instead. The flowers started a year after that. At first I thought it was sweet. Some friend of his trying to keep his memory alive. But the first note had the exact handwriting. The same smudge of ink in the corner. The same words he used every year when he was alive. My heart told me it was impossible. My mind told me it was cruel. Every year since, they've arrived. Same day, same flowers, same message. I moved 3 times, changed my number, deleted my social media. Somehow, the flowers always found me. You think you can bury guilt? Can't. Finds your address even when you change it. I took the box inside and set it on the kitchen counter. My hands were shaking. I didn't want to open the note this time. I told myself I wouldn't. But my eyes betrayed me. I slid the small white card from under the ribbon. The ink was darker than usual. The strokes more deliberate. This year it didn't say happy birthday, my love. Said I forgive you. And that's when my breath caught. Forgive me for what? Nobody else could know. Not unless they were there that night. The room felt smaller. The air thickened, pressing against my ribs. I tore open the box and inhaled the scent of the lilies. Strong, almost suffocating. Beneath them was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it, expecting another note. But it was a photograph. Photograph of me. Standing by Michael's grave. Taken last week. My legs nearly gave out. I gripped the counter to keep from collapsing. That grave was in another town, 2 hours away. I had gone there alone. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even park near the gate. What? Cried. I whispered to the ground, I'm sorry. No one could have seen me. No one. I wanted to believe it was a prank. Maybe some twisted coincidence. But the handwriting. The words. Timing. This wasn't random. It was personal. And if Michael wasn't the one sending them, then someone who knew everything was. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The street outside was quiet, washed in the gray light of morning. The neighbors' cars were gone. Just empty driveways and the hum of distant traffic. Still I felt watched. For 15 years I'd been trying to forget that night. But forgetfulness has sharp edges. Cuts deeper when you pretend you're clean. The accident happened on a rainy evening. Michael had been drinking, angry, accusing me of things I hadn't done, or maybe things I had. We'd been fighting for months. I was tired of pretending to be the loving wife everyone thought I was. Tired of smiling at church and choking on my lies at home. When he stormed out that night, I didn't follow him. I just stood at the window, watching his headlights fade into the dark. The last words I said to him were, "You'll regret it." I didn't know those would be the last words he ever heard. The police said the brakes failed. The car flipped into a ravine. They said he died instantly. They said I was lucky not to be with him. But I wasn't lucky. Because I'd known about those brakes for weeks. I'd driven that car the day before. I heard the grinding. Felt the pull. I told myself I'd take it to the mechanic. Then I didn't. Because part of me didn't care. And part of me wanted something terrible to happen. That's the part one buried with him. Or tried to. I sat on the kitchen floor for a long time, the lilies beside me, the photograph burning a hole in my hand. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? Someone sent me flowers that shouldn't exist. They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd ask questions I couldn't answer. The clock ticked. The morning light turned gold. The world outside went on like it didn't just pull a ghost into my house. I finally picked up my phone and called the flower shop. My voice was steady, too steady. "Hi, this is Clara Davis. I received a delivery this morning, but there must be a mistake." The woman on the line hesitated. "Can I have the order number, ma'am?" I gave it to her. I could hear her typing, the low buzz of music in the background. Then she said softly, "Oh, that order's been in our system for years." "How many years?" 15, she said. "It's prepaid. The sender's name is..." She stopped. "Please," I said. "Tell me." "The sender's name is Michael Davis." My blood turned cold. "That's impossible." "I'm sorry, ma'am. That's what it says here. It renews automatically every year. He left enough to cover it for another 5 years, I think." I ended the call. For a long time, I sat there staring at my reflection in the dark screen. 15 years ago, when Michael died, we didn't have much money. We were drowning in debt. He couldn't have afforded a prepaid anything, let alone 15 years of deliveries. So either the florist was lying, or someone had made sure those payments never stopped. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. But mistakes don't spell out "I forgive you." I threw the flowers into the trash. But an hour later I pulled them back out. I couldn't stop staring at them. They looked too alive, too perfect. I filled a vase and placed them on the table. Maybe I needed to keep them close, to see if something changed. To prove they were just flowers. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind whispered my name. Around midnight I heard it. A soft thud from the porch. My heart raced. I turned on the light. The box was gone. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air was cold still. Only the ribbon remained, fluttering on the ground. Then I saw it, etched faintly into the dust on my porch, in someone's handwriting. "You can't throw me away." I stood frozen on the porch, staring at those words written in the dust. "You can't throw me away." For a moment I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the sentence itself that chilled me. It was the way the letters slanted, the way the loops curved. It was Michael's handwriting. My first thought was that it had to be a coincidence. Or maybe my mind was seeing what it wanted to see. Guilt plays tricks like that. But when I bent down and traced the letters with my finger, the shape of the M was exact. The same curl he always made, that tiny imperfection I used to tease him about. The porch light flickered once, twice. I backed up and slammed the door shut. My reflection in the glass looked like someone I didn't recognize. Hair tangled, eyes wide, half crazed. I told myself I'd clean it up in the morning. But I didn't. Instead, I lay awake the rest of the night, watching the shadow of the flowers across the room. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's face, half smiling, half accusing. By dawn, my heart felt bruised from beating so hard. The next day, I tried to pretend nothing had happened. I made coffee. I answered a few work emails. I watered the plants. But every ordinary thing felt staged, like I was moving through a set someone had built for me. Around noon, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but habit made me pick up. "Hello." Silence. Then a faint breath on the other end. "Who is this?" said. Still nothing. Just breathing. And then a whisper. A man's voice, hoarse, quiet. "You kept the lilies." Froze. My throat closed up, and before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at the screen. No caller ID. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. For a long moment, I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, the world spinning around me. Then instinct took over. Called the phone company. They said they couldn't trace private calls. Of course they couldn't. I turned off the phone, pulled the SIM card out, and threw it in a drawer. But it didn't help. The words replayed in my head again and again. "You kept the lilies." How would anyone know that? I looked at the vase on the table. The flowers looked fresher than before, like they'd just been cut. Dew still clung to the petals. I touched one and felt the chill of the morning still trapped in it. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. A small white thread tangled in the stems. It wasn't part of the bouquet wrapping. It was thin, almost invisible, but it caught the light just enough to glint. Pulled it gently. A tag came loose from the bottom, soaked and nearly ruined. The ink had bled, but a few words were still readable. Check the place where we first met. My breath hitched. That place was the old footbridge near the lake, 20 miles out of town. The one where Michael had given me my first bouquet of lilies. The same bridge where, years later, we'd had our biggest argument before the accident. For a while I just sat there staring at the message. Every rational thought told me to ignore it, to let it go, to stop digging. But curiosity and fear are sisters. They hold hands and drag you where you shouldn't go. By late afternoon I was in my car driving toward the lake. The road looked the same as it always had. Quiet, winding through fields and clusters of trees, but something about it felt heavier, like time hadn't passed here the way it had everywhere else. The closer I got, the harder my chest tightened. I rolled the window down, letting the cold wind sting my face. When I reached the bridge, it was almost empty. A few cars passed in the distance, their reflections flashing on the water below. I parked on the shoulder and stepped out. The wood creaked under my feet, soft and damp from the rain earlier that morning. I looked around. Nothing unusual. Just the lake, still and dark, holding the color of the clouds above it. I almost laughed. Maybe this was what guilt did. It sent you chasing ghosts that weren't there. I told myself I'd stay for 1 minute. Then I'd go home and never talk about it again. But when I reached the middle of the bridge, I saw something. A single lily. It was lying on the railing, fresh, its stem wrapped with the same gold ribbon as the bouquet that had arrived at my door. And beside it, taped to the wood, a photo. Me and Michael. From years ago. The two of us standing right here, smiling, his arm around my waist. The picture had been folded in half, then straightened out again, like someone had carried it for a long time. My stomach twisted. There was writing on the back. Do you still visit the ravine? The ravine. The one where his car had crashed. Felt sick. Someone was playing with me. Someone who knew everything. Where we met, where he died, what I'd done. I looked around. The trees were still. The air smelled of rain and earth. Nothing moved. But I felt it again, that sensation of being watched. I left the flower and photo there and walked quickly back to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. When the engine started, my phone buzzed. Even though I'd turned it off, the screen lit up. One new message. No number. Just a blank contact. The message said, "You're getting warmer." I almost threw the phone out the window. Instead, I gripped it so tightly the edges cut into my palm. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. That night, I locked every door, checked every window. I turned on every light in the house and still couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there. When I finally managed to close my eyes, I dreamed of the accident. The rain. The sound of metal twisting. But this time when I reached the wreck, Michael wasn't inside. The car was empty. I woke up gasping, my pillow damp with sweat. The clock read 3:12 a.m. I got up, walked to the window and looked out. The porch was empty. The street was quiet. Then I saw it. Something small, white, lying at the edge of the driveway. I went outside, barefoot, the gravel biting into my feet. It was another lily. Fresh, the petals glowing faintly under the streetlight. Tied to the stem was a small tag. I lifted it with trembling hands. You never looked inside the coffin. I didn't sleep after reading that message. You never looked inside the coffin. Those words looped in my head until morning light sliced through the blinds like accusation. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone face down, a mug of cold coffee untouched. For 15 years I'd built my life on a single fact. Michael was gone. And now that single fact trembled like a cracked foundation. Maybe someone was playing with me. Maybe grief had finally found a new way to hurt. But then again, who else even knew what happened that night? I drove to the storage unit at dawn, the one I swore I'd never open again. The key was still hidden under the flower pot outside my apartment. My hands shook as I used it. Inside was the box I kept from his funeral, programs, condolence cards, the folded flag his mother refused to take. And beneath all that, the police report. Reading it felt like stepping back into a nightmare. Single vehicle accident. Cliffside curve. Fire involved. No remains recovered. That last line had always haunted me. Back then, they'd said the fire was too intense, that identifying anything was impossible. I'd accepted it because I needed to. Because admitting doubt would have exposed everything I'd done before the crash. We'd fought. Loud enough that the neighbors called the cops. He'd told me he knew about my secret, the one thing I'd hidden our entire marriage. And I'd said words I can't forget. If you walk out that door, don't come back, and he walked out. And an hour later, the car exploded on County Road 16. The guilt was enough to build a coffin around my own life. But I never looked inside his. Now, reading those words again, I realized whoever sent that message knew too much. They weren't guessing. They were reminding me. Mirror. I opened the storage box further and found the bouquet ribbon from his first memorial. It smelled faintly of smoke and lilies. My hands trembled as I noticed something else. Another ribbon, newer, tucked underneath. Pale cream, not the faded ivory of 15 years. Someone had been in here. I left the unit, heart hammering. The lot was empty, but I felt watched. The kind of slow, steady gaze that sits between your shoulder blades. Driving home, I kept seeing Michael's face reflected in the rearview. Not the way he looked the night we met, but the way he looked that last evening. Tired, betrayed, eyes wet with fury. The kind of fury that doesn't die easy. At home, I opened my laptop and searched every name I could think of. Old co-workers, friends, anyone who might still be connected to him. Most had moved away. But one name stopped me. Evan Cole. His best friend. He'd vanished right after the accident, said he couldn't stand the memories. But last year, someone by that same name started a small floral delivery business 3 towns over. My chest went cold. I found the shop's listing online. The logo was simple, a single white lily. The same flower I received every year. For 10 minutes I stared at the screen, unable to move. Then I dialed the number. It rang twice before a soft male voice answered. Cole's Flowers. Froze. Hi, I managed. I got a delivery from your shop yesterday. I just wanted to know who placed it. Can I get the order number? He asked politely. I gave it, reading from the little tag that had come with the bouquet. My voice trembled over the digits. There was a pause on the line, too long to be routine. I heard a breath. Then, Ma'am, I'm sorry, but that order was marked private. No sender details allowed. Something in his tone wasn't right. Careful, like someone stepping around a lie. Could you at least tell me how long this order's been running? Press. 15 years, he said quietly. Standing order. Same day every year. 15 years. My pulse thundered in my ears. Who set it up? Another pause. I really can't say. But I heard it then. A faint rustle, as if he'd turned away from the phone, whispering to someone. And a second, lower voice murmured something I couldn't make out. Then he said quickly, I'm sorry, I have to go, and the line clicked dead. I sat there, phone against my ear, staring at nothing. A standing order for 15 years. Paid for, delivered, never missed a date. The cost alone would have been enormous. Whoever was behind it had money or motive. I replayed the whisper in the background. 2 words surfaced from the static memory of it. She called. I didn't know who she was. But the voice wasn't Evan's. That night I couldn't stay in the apartment. I packed a small bag and drove to the coast, to the cabin we used to visit summers. It was supposed to be abandoned now, owned by the bank. But when I arrived, the porch light was on. My heart pounded as I stepped out of the car. The salt air felt thick, heavy with the past. I walked up the creaking steps and knocked once. No answer. The doorknob turned easily. Inside, The air smelled faintly of lilies. The door eased open with a sigh, as if the house itself recognized me. Dust motes floated in the beam of my flashlight, spinning slowly like ash. Everything looked exactly as we'd left it. The plaid couch, the chipped mug on the coffee table, the photograph of us at the pier. Only one thing didn't belong. A vase of fresh white lilies sat on the mantel, droplets still clinging to their petals. Froze. The stems had been cut clean, the ribbon tied in the same cream silk I'd found in the storage unit. The air smelled too alive for a place that was supposed to be abandoned. My first instinct was to call someone, anyone, but who? The police would laugh. "Ma'am, someone left you flowers." They wouldn't hear the years behind it, or the promise that came with that message. You never looked inside the coffin. I moved deeper into the cabin. The floorboards creaked under my shoes. Every object here had a memory attached to it. The wine ring on the coffee table, the dent in the wall from when Michael tried to hang the picture frame. I whispered into the silence. "If this is some kind of joke, stop." The house stayed quiet. Only the wind pressed against the windows, slow and patient. Then I noticed something small on the kitchen counter. A receipt. It was dated 3 days ago from a hardware store in town. The name on it made my stomach twist. Cole. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. Evan had been here. Or someone wanted me to think so. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The grass was flattened where a car must have been parked recently. A tire mark led toward the narrow road that wound through the trees. For a long moment I just stood there, the ocean murmuring below the cliff. "Michael," I said quietly, "what are you doing?" Inside again I checked my phone. One new text from unknown number and it says, "Stop digging." No punctuation. No signature. Just 2 words that carried the weight of a threat. My throat went dry. Whoever sent it knew exactly where I was. I locked the doors and pulled the curtains, heart hammering. If Michael was alive, and if Evan was helping him, then 15 years of grief had been built on a lie. But why keep it going? Why the flowers, the silence, the haunting generosity that felt like punishment? I sat on the couch and pulled out the old box I'd brought from storage. Beneath the police report, I found something I hadn't noticed before. An envelope glued to the inside of the lid. It had yellowed with time. My name was written across it in Michael's handwriting. I tore it open, hands shaking. Inside was a single sheet of paper, edges burned as if rescued from a fire. "You buried the wrong man." The room spun. I gripped the arm of the couch to stay upright. I read the sentence again and again, searching for some logical explanation. Insurance fraud, a cruel prank, anything. But the handwriting was his. The curves of the letters, the way he crossed his T. I'd watched him write enough grocery lists to know. Sound came from outside. Gravel crunching. Car door closing. I killed the lights and crouched near the window. Headlights flashed across the wall, then faded. Footsteps approached the porch. Slow, measured, certain. My phone buzzed again. Same number. Leave before it's too late. I should have run, but part of me needed to see who it was. 15 years of guilt had hardened into curiosity stronger than fear. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then a soft knock 3 times, deliberate. I waited, barely breathing. The knock came again, louder. "Clara," a man's voice said quietly. "I know you're in there." I pressed my hand against my mouth to stop a gasp. The voice was older, rougher, but familiar. "Open the door," he said. "It's time you knew the truth." The handle turned slowly. The lock held, but the sound of metal against metal made my skin crawl. I backed away, pulse thundering, eyes fixed on the door. He spoke again, almost pleading now. "Please. It's not what you think." Then silence. When I finally looked through the window, the porch was empty. But on the step, glinting in the flashlight beam, was another envelope. I waited until the car engine faded before I picked it up. The paper was damp from sea mist, the handwriting the same as before. Inside was a photograph, old, slightly blurred, taken on a hospital bed. A man's hand clasping another's. Scrawled beneath it were 5 words that made my blood run cold. You buried his brother instead. I sat at the cabin table staring at the photograph until the edges curled in my fingers. You buried his brother instead. The words wouldn't settle. They kept shifting like the tide. Michael never had a brother. Not one he spoke of. But the resemblance in that photo, the curve of the jaw, the scar above the eyebrow, was too exact to ignore. I turned the photo over. On the back, a hospital stamp. St. Mariner's Clinic, July 12. 15 years ago. The same week as the crash. I'd never heard of that hospital before. I opened my laptop, the weak signal barely holding a connection, and searched. It wasn't listed anymore. Closed a decade ago after a fire. No digital records. I zoomed in on the corner of the photo and caught something small. A nurse's badge blurred beside the bed. The name looked like L. Harris. Lead. By dawn I was already on the road. The ocean shrinking in the rear mirror. Every passing mile tasted like rust and memory. I kept replaying the voice at the door. Clara, it's not what you think. At a diner near the old highway, I found a man who remembered St. Mariner's. It used to be a private clinic, he said, refilling my coffee. Mostly handled special cases. People who wanted to disappear, you know. Disappear. The word rang through me. I drove to the town archives, an old brick building that smelled of dust and lemon polish. The clerk, a woman in her 60s, looked up from her crossword. I'm looking for information on St. Mariner's Clinic, I said. She frowned. That place closed ages ago. What for? I think someone I knew was treated there. She sighed and disappeared into a back room. When she returned, she carried a thin, water-damaged folder. Most records burned in the fire, she said. But this survived. Inside was a list of names. Patients transferred before closure. My heart stumbled when I saw 2 that mattered. Michael Reed, and directly beneath it, Samuel Reed. There it was. A brother I never knew existed. I took a photo of the page before she could ask questions and left. In the car, I compared the signature beside Samuel Reed to the handwriting on the envelopes. The same curling R, the same confident tilt. It wasn't Michael who had been writing to me. It was Samuel. But why pretend to be him? I parked at a rest stop and scrolled through old social media archives, news clippings, anything with a Reed name. After an hour of digital digging, I found a tiny obituary. Samuel Reed, presumed dead in car fire, County Road 16. The same night. The same wreck. 2 brothers in the same car. The article had one photo. Grainy, taken from a distance. 2 men loading boxes into a trunk. One looked like Michael. The other had that same scar above his brow. My pulse raced. If both were in the car, who did we bury? I drove back toward town, the sun already slipping behind clouds. I needed to find Evan. He'd been close to Michael, and apparently to everything else. Cole's flowers looked ordinary in daylight. Bells jingled as I entered. A woman behind the counter looked up from trimming stems. Is Evan around? Yes. He's on a delivery, she said. Can I help you? I'm an old friend. I just need to. She tilted her head. Are you Clara? The sound of my name froze me. Yes. She set down the scissors carefully. He said you might come. He left something for you. From beneath the counter, she pulled a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with white ribbon. He said not to open it here. Where is he now? Yes. She hesitated. I don't know. He just said to tell you, he's sorry. The words hit harder than I expected. Sorry for what? Outside, I sat in the car with the box on the passenger seat. My fingers hovered over the ribbon. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. You're closer than you think. My stomach turned. The message came exactly as the shop door locked behind me. I started the engine, the box still unopened. The lid felt warm against my palm, as if it had been waiting for me. I untied the ribbon. Inside was a single key and a folded map. A red circle marked one location, the cemetery where Michael was buried. And under the key was a note written in the same familiar hand. If you want the truth, dig where you lied. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, but because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph. Michael standing by the fountain 5 years after his death. The date printed on the back mocked me. The handwriting, familiar, slanted, with that same half-looped he always made when he was in a hurry, told me everything I didn't want to believe. Morning came too soon, gray and sharp. I sat on my couch, coffee gone cold in my hands, and whispered to myself, "If you're out there, Michael, why?" I knew I couldn't tell anyone yet. Not the police, not even Evan. Especially not Evan. He'd think I was losing it again. The last time I brought up Michael, he told me gently, "You have to stop living with ghosts, Clara." But maybe it wasn't a ghost. Maybe it was a man who wanted to stay one. The florist had given me more than she realized. A delivery address she thought was just the billing record from a family friend. But the street name struck me like lightning. Maple Hollow. Quiet neighborhood 2 towns away. I shouldn't have gone there. Every part of me screamed that it was a mistake. But guilt is a cruel engine. It drives you straight into the storm. By noon, I was parked across the street from a small white cottage tucked behind tall hedges. A wind chime clinked on the porch, the sound faint but steady. A mailbox read H. Miles. Not Michael Adams. My breath caught. His mother's maiden name. Coincidence? Maybe. But coincidences had started to feel like clues lately. I stayed there for nearly an hour, pretending to scroll my phone but watching. Every sound made me jump. Then, at 1:43 p.m. exactly, the door opened. A man stepped out. He was taller than Michael, maybe broader at the shoulders. But when he turned slightly, that posture, that way of tilting his head when the sun hit his eyes, I froze. The air left my lungs. It was him. Older. Beard flecked with gray. But him. I fumbled for my phone, raised it shakily to take a photo, but my screen suddenly went black. My heart dropped. I hadn't even noticed how low the battery was. When I looked up again, he was gone. The porch door creaked shut like nothing had happened. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My thoughts were shards, sharp, bright, cutting through the years I'd spent mourning him. If he was alive, then whose body had I buried? That night I opened the old box again, the one I swore I'd never touch. Inside were all the letters he'd written me, tied with that same blue ribbon. I untied them slowly, as if they were something sacred. The last one was different. Not paper, but a small folded card I didn't remember seeing before. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Stop digging, Clara. You won't like what you find." No signature. Just that single sentence. I stared at it for what felt like hours. It wasn't his handwriting. Too neat. Too careful. So who left it there? And when? The next morning I went back to the cemetery, to his grave. The earth had settled years ago, the grass trimmed, the headstone clean. But something new caught my eye. A single fresh rose lay against the stone. Not wilted. Still wet with dew. I knelt down, fingers shaking, and noticed something else. A small tag beneath the rose, with an address scrawled on it. 41 Maple Hollow. The same house. He was playing with me. The next few days blurred. Every sound, every passing car, felt like surveillance. I checked my locks twice, then 3 times. My phone rang once from an unknown number. And when I answered, silence. Just faint breathing. Then a click. I started recording myself at night, desperate to prove I wasn't imagining this. And on the 3rd night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., there it was. A whisper. "Clara." I replayed it over and over, the voice soft, distorted, but familiar. He wanted me to know he was watching. By the end of the week I snapped. I printed the photo, grabbed the note, and drove back to Maple Hollow. I wasn't going to hide anymore. When I pulled up, the cottage was dark, no sign of life. I got out, walked to the porch, and knocked. Once. No answer. I should have left. But I pushed the door slightly, and it creaked open. Unlocked. Inside smelled of cedar and dust. The kind of scent that lingers in places untouched for too long. On the mantel, a photo frame faced the wall. I turned it around and gasped. It was me, smiling, younger, holding a bouquet of white lilies. The same lilies from the first arrangement I ever received after his death. And then a sound behind me. Floorboards shifting. I turned sharply, my pulse hammering in my ears. In the hallway stood a man, half in shadow. And even before my eyes adjusted, I knew. Michael. Alive. He looked exactly as he did in the photograph. Older, colder, but still carrying that quiet sadness that used to pull me in. For a long time we just stared at each other. Neither spoke. Then he said, voice low, calm, almost rehearsed. You shouldn't have come here. My knees weakened. Words tangled in my throat. You're supposed to be dead. He gave a small, bitter smile. You of all people should know how easy that can be. The air between us turned heavy. What does that mean? I whispered. He stepped closer, eyes unreadable. You want the truth. I nodded, barely breathing. Then stop pretending you don't already know it. And just like that, the world tilted. Everything I thought I knew, every piece of guilt I carried, began to rearrange itself in my mind. Because deep down I realized, he wasn't lying. There was something I had forgotten. Something I had buried long before him. The air in that cottage felt heavy, like it remembered every lie spoken inside it. Michael's eyes never left mine, and the longer I looked at him, the less I recognized the man I used to love. He wasn't smiling anymore. That faint, lopsided grin that used to melt my anger was gone. What stood in front of me now was someone measured, detached, a man who'd been rehearsing this moment for years. You don't look surprised, he said. My voice trembled. Because I stopped trusting my own grief a long time ago. He tilted his head slightly, a gesture I once found endearing. Now it sent a chill crawling down my spine. You came here anyway. I had to, I whispered. You let me bury you, Michael. You let me mourn you. Every year, every birthday, those flowers. He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing the space between us. You kept them. Of course I did. I snapped, my throat tight. They were all I had left of you. Something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt, not empathy, but recognition. As if this outburst was exactly what he'd been waiting for. He circled the room slowly, touching the edges of furniture like he was reacquainting himself with the space. You always needed something to hold on to. Proof. Symbols. A reason to feel innocent. Innocent. Echoed. I buried the man I loved. What could I possibly be guilty of? He turned back toward me. Everything. That single word hit harder than any shout. I felt my knees weaken, a dizziness rising behind my eyes. What are you talking about? But he didn't answer. Not yet. He walked to the mantel and picked up the photograph. My photograph, the one of me holding lilies years ago. He stared at it for a long time before speaking. I used to watch you back then. After it happened, you'd sit by that window with your tea, pretending you weren't waiting for me. I swallowed. You watched me. He nodded slowly. Every year on your birthday, I needed to see if you'd changed. If you'd tell anyone. Tell anyone what? He smiled faintly, like he was playing a private game I didn't know the rules to. That's the thing, Clara. You don't remember, do you? I remember everything, I said through clenched teeth. Do you? He stepped closer again, voice soft, patient, cruel in its calmness. Then tell me, what happened the night I disappeared? The words cut through the air like a blade. My chest tightened. Images flickered. Rain on glass, an argument, a door slamming, and then nothing. My throat closed up. You left. We fought. You said you needed space. That's all. His laugh was dry, humorless. That's the version you told yourself so you could sleep at night. I shook my head. You're lying. He didn't deny it. He just stared, the silence stretching long enough to make me feel every heartbeat. Finally he said, "Do you know what it's like to be erased, Clara? To watch your own funeral and realize the person crying over your grave is the reason you had to die." Froze. My mind rebelled against his words, but my body knew the truth before my brain did. "What are you saying?" He took another step, and now he was close enough for me to see the faint scar under his jaw, one I didn't remember. "I'm saying," he murmured, "that you weren't the victim you think you were." The room began to spin. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "You faked everything to punish me?" "Punish?" His tone sharpened. "No. Punishment ends. This was a reminder." "A reminder of what?" I demanded. He didn't answer. His eyes darted to the old music box sitting on the shelf, the one he'd given me years ago. He wound it once. A soft lullaby began to play, slow and warped with age. The same tune that was played the night we met. The sound clawed at something deep inside me. A buried memory, muffled under years of guilt and denial, started to surface. Vain. Screaming. My own voice shouting something I couldn't quite hear. His hand on mine, not in affection but restraint. My vision blurred. I pressed my palms to my temples. "Stop it," I whispered. "Stop." Michael's voice lowered, almost tender. "That song. It helps you remember, doesn't it?" Tears filled my eyes. What did I do? He leaned in, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath when he whispered, "You really don't remember." My silence was his answer. He exhaled slowly, almost satisfied. "Good. Then maybe you're not ready yet." He walked past me, the faint scent of cedar following him, and stopped by the door. His tone shifted, calm again like a teacher dismissing class. "When you are," he said, "you'll come back here. Alone." I turned toward him, desperate. "Tell me what you want from me." He paused, hand on the doorknob. Then he looked over his shoulder and smiled, that cold, knowing smile that didn't belong to the man I once loved. "What I want," he said softly, "is for you to remember what you buried that night." And with that, he stepped outside, disappearing into the dim light, leaving the door wide open behind him. The wind from outside carried through the house, sweeping across the mantel and knocking over the photo of me holding the lilies. The glass shattered at my feet. In its reflection, for a moment, I swore I saw another face standing behind me. But when I turned, there was no one there. I didn't go back to Maple Hollow for 3 days. I told myself I wouldn't. Told myself I was done letting ghosts pull my strings. But guilt isn't a ghost. It's gravity. Drags you home. The 4th morning I woke up with the music box tune still echoing in my head. That broken lullaby wouldn't stop until I found the missing piece of that night. I drove through fog so thick the road disappeared. When the cottage appeared, it felt smaller, almost fragile, as if the house itself was exhausted by secrets. Inside, dust had settled on everything except one thing, the table where the photo of me used to stand. In its place lay an envelope. My name written in Michael's handwriting. I hesitated, then tore it open. "You wanted the truth. It's where it's always been, under the roses." No signature. Just that line and a small key taped to the bottom. Outside, the garden was wild, overgrown. I knelt where the roses were thickest and dug with my hands until the soil gave way to a small wooden box. Inside, another photo. It showed Michael and me 15 years ago, standing in our kitchen. I was smiling, but he wasn't. Behind us, a mirror caught a reflection. My hand raised, his face turned away, mid-argument. In the corner of the photo was a timestamp. The night he died. My breath caught. Someone else had taken this picture. Someone who'd been in the house. Tucked behind it was a note, this one in a different handwriting. "You both wanted out. Only one of you got it." The words blurred as I read them again and again. Was it Michael's brother? Evan? Someone neither of us remembered. The sudden chime startled me. The music box had started playing inside the house. Slow, deliberate, the way he'd wound it before. I stepped back into the living room. The box sat open on the mantel, turning by itself. Next to it a single red rose. And beside the rose, a phone. My old phone. The one I'd lost the night he vanished. Its screen lit up with a new message. Now you remember. My pulse hammered. I whispered to the empty room. What did we do, Michael? No answer. Just the faint sound of footsteps outside, fading into the fog. I rushed to the window, nothing. Only the wind moving through the roses. On the table the phone buzzed again. A video file appeared. The thumbnail was that same mirror image from the photo. Press play, then stopped. Couldn't. Some truths live better in the dark. I deleted the file, dropped the phone into the box, and covered it back with soil. Then I whispered into the quiet. We're even now. As I turned to leave, I saw movement in the mirror above the fireplace. My reflection, and behind it, a man's shadow. I spun around. The room was empty. Outside, a delivery van passed by, slowing at the gate. The driver leaned out and set something by the fence. A bouquet of lilies wrapped in white paper. A small tag fluttered in the wind. I didn't need to read it, but I did anyway. Happy birthday, Clara. No name. No address. Just that familiar looping why. I stood there until the van disappeared down the road. Then I laughed, soft, almost relieved. Maybe he wanted forgiveness. Maybe he wanted guilt. Maybe we both did. The roses swayed in the wind like they were whispering something I couldn't quite catch. Maybe after all these years the question was never who buried whom, but why neither of us could stop digging. If you think manipulation disguised as love is pure evil, hit subscribe now. Only those who excuse lies would scroll past this one.